The courtroom in Brookvale, Ohio, felt smaller than it was. Every seat packed, every breath held. Camera lenses glinted from the back row where journalists jostled for position, their equipment humming quietly in the tense silence. The gallery overflowed with students, parents, teachers, all watching the defendant's table where Tyler Raines sat in his orange jumpsuit, white undershirt visible at the collar. He was 17 years old. He was accused of involuntary manslaughter, and from the moment he walked through those doors, it was clear he didn't believe any of this was real. Not the charges, not the courtroom, not the grief radiating from the victim's family 3 rows behind the prosecution. For Tyler, this wasn't a reckoning. It was a performance. He grinned at the cameras. He laughed when the victim's family cried. He believed the system was another audience he could charm, manipulate, and ultimately beat. His defense leaned heavily on the idea that everything was a prank gone wrong, that he never meant for anyone to die. Yet behind the scenes, detectives and prosecutors were building toward a single, devastating truth. A single piece of evidence, one video file, would destroy everything. Not a theory, not speculation. His own voice, his own face, his own confession. And when that evidence finally surfaced, the courtroom would fall silent, the performance would collapse, and by the time the judge spoke Tyler's name for the last time, the illusion of being untouchable would be gone forever. Tyler Raines entered the courtroom for his arraignment with the swagger of someone walking into a party. His orange jumpsuit somehow looked deliberate, as if he'd chosen it from a rack of designer clothing. He nodded to someone in the gallery. Actually nodded, like this was a social event. The bailiff guided him to the defense table where his attorney, Marcus Holloway, a veteran public defender with gray streaking his temples, sat with a leather folio open before him. Holloway didn't look up when Tyler sat down. That should have been Tyler's first warning. But Tyler was too busy scanning the crowd, finding the cameras, offering a small smile that said he knew something nobody else did. Judge Patricia Hendricks entered, and the room rose. She was 63, with steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She'd presided over juvenile cases for 20 years, and her reputation was ironclad fairness, tempered with zero tolerance for theatrics. She settled into her seat, surveyed the courtroom with eyes that missed nothing, and nodded to the bailiff. "The state of Ohio versus Tyler Joseph Raines," the bailiff announced. "Case number J-23-417. The charge is involuntary manslaughter." Tyler leaned back slightly in his chair. Involuntary. That word was doing heavy lifting for him, and he knew it. The prosecutor, Angela Chen, stood. She was 39, compact and precise, with dark hair cut short and a tailored navy suit that meant business. She'd spent the last 3 weeks sleeping 4 hours a night, building this case brick by brick, and the exhaustion showed only in the faint shadows under her eyes. Her voice, though, was clear and sharp. "Your Honor, the state charges that on the night of October 14th, the defendant Tyler Raines caused the death of 16-year-old Marcus Webb through actions that were reckless, negligent, and ultimately fatal. The defendant has claimed this death occurred during what he describes as a prank robbery. The state will demonstrate that this was no accident." Tyler's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. What occurred was a tragic misunderstanding, a juvenile attempt at humor that spiraled beyond anyone's control or intent. Tyler Raines never intended to harm Marcus Webb. This was a terrible accident, nothing more. Judge Hendricks looked at Tyler. He met her gaze and held it, a slight smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Her eyes narrowed fractionally. "Plea of not guilty is entered," she said. "Bail status?" "The state requests the defendant remain in custody." "Your Honor," Chen said, "the severity of the charge and the defendant's demonstrated lack of remorse make him a flight risk and a potential danger." Holloway started to object, but Judge Hendricks raised a hand. "I've reviewed the initial filings. The defendant will remain in custody pending trial. We'll reconvene for preliminary hearings in 1 week." Her gavel came down with a crack that made several people in the gallery jump. Tyler didn't jump. He turned slightly in his seat and mouthed something toward one of the cameras. A journalist in the third row would later transcribe it as "relax," like he was reassuring his audience that everything was under control, that he had this handled. As the bailiffs approached to escort him out, Tyler glanced over his shoulder at the victim's family. Marcus Webb's mother, Diane, sat rigid in her seat, her husband's arm around her shoulders. Her face was a mask of grief barely held together. Tyler's eyes met hers for just a moment, and his smile widened by a fraction before he turned away. In the hallway outside, Angela Chen stood with her team, 2 assistant prosecutors and Detective Marisol Vega, who'd been lead investigator on the case from the first 911 call. Vega was 42, a 20-year veteran of the Brookvale Police Department with sharp features and eyes that catalogued everything. "He's performing," Chen said quietly, watching through the courtroom doors as Tyler was led away. "Every second in there, he's playing to an audience." "He's been performing since we picked him up," Vega replied. At the station, he asked if the interrogation room had cameras, not because he was worried, because he wanted to know if anyone was watching. "What's his endgame?" one of the assistant prosecutors asked. "Does he think charm is going to get him acquitted?" "He thinks he's smarter than everyone in that room," Chen said. "He thinks if he controls the narrative, controls the performance, the facts won't matter." She turned to Vega. "Tell me you've got something solid. Because if this goes to trial with just the initial evidence, his story might hold." Vega's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "We've got threads. I'm pulling them. Give me time." "Time is exactly what we don't have," Chen said. But she trusted Vega. If anyone could find the truth buried under Tyler's lies, it was her. The preliminary hearings began 6 days later. The courtroom was even more crowded this time. Word having spread through Brookvale about the smirking defendant who treated his manslaughter charge like a joke. Tyler entered in the same orange jumpsuit, and this time he actually waved to someone in the gallery. A cluster of students from Brookvale High, some of whom had been Marcus Webb's classmates, sat together near the back. A few looked horrified. A couple looked fascinated in that dark way people slow down for car accidents. The defense called its first witness, Connor Mills, 17, one of Tyler's friends. Connor walked to the stand like he was walking to the principal's office, reluctant and uncomfortable. He wore a button-down shirt that looked borrowed and kept his eyes down. Holloway approached with practiced gentleness. "Connor, how long have you known Tyler Raines?" "Since middle school." "Like 5 years." "And would you describe Tyler as violent? Aggressive?" "No, not at all. Tyler's like the funny guy." always cracking jokes, doing bits. That's just him. On the night of October 14th, were you aware Tyler was planning what he called a prank robbery? Connor shifted. I mean, he mentioned it, but it was just talk. Tyler was always talking about pranks and stuff. Nobody thought he'd actually do anything. Did you ever hear Tyler express intent to harm Marcus Webb? No, never. Tyler didn't even have beef with Marcus. It was just supposed to be funny. Angela Chen stood for cross-examination. She moved slowly, deliberately, letting the silence build. Connor, you said Tyler was always talking about pranks. What kind of pranks? I don't know. Stupid stuff. Jumping out and scaring people. Fake injuries. Just dumb jokes. Did any of those jokes ever involve weapons? Connor hesitated. Not really. Not really. Or no. I mean, once he brought a fake gun to school as a prop for a video, but it was obviously fake. But he brought it. Yeah. And on October 14th, was the weapon Tyler used fake? Connor's face went pale. No. No, Chen repeated. The knife that killed Marcus Webb was real. Tyler brought a real weapon to what he claims was a joke. Does that sound like Tyler's usual pranks? I don't know. I wasn't there. No, you weren't. But you're here now, defending him. Why? Because he's my friend. Your friend killed someone, Connor. Do you understand that? Holloway objected. Badgering the witness, Your Honor. Sustained. Move on, Ms. Chen. But the point was made. Chen returned to her table, and Tyler leaned over to whisper something to Holloway. Whatever it was made Holloway's jaw tighten. Tyler was smiling. As the hearing continued, more pieces of the initial story emerged. The police summary described a scene at Brookvale Park just after midnight on October 14th. Marcus Webb had been found by a jogger at 6 in the morning, his body partially concealed behind a maintenance shed. He'd bled out from a stab wound to the abdomen. The initial investigation found Tyler's fingerprints on the knife, which had been discarded near the scene. When questioned, Tyler claimed he and Marcus had planned a prank robbery to film and post online. They'd argued about the script. Marcus had grabbed the knife from Tyler's bag as a joke, and in the struggle to get it back, Marcus had been accidentally stabbed. It was a clean story. Simple, plausible enough that the initial charge had been involuntary manslaughter rather than murder. But as Detective Vega testified later that afternoon, the story had problems. Detective Vega, Chen said, walk us through your initial interview with the defendant. Vega sat straight in the witness box, hands folded, voice steady. I interviewed Tyler Raines at 11:30 a.m. on October 14th, approximately 5 hours after Marcus Webb's body was discovered. Tyler was brought to the station as a person of interest after witnesses placed him with Marcus the night before. What was his demeanor? Calm, almost relaxed. He expressed surprise when told Marcus was dead, but not shock, not grief. Did his story remain consistent? No. Vega pulled out her notes, though Chen suspected she didn't need them. In his first telling, Tyler said Marcus had brought the knife, and it was entirely Marcus's idea to film the prank. In his second telling, 30 minutes later, Tyler said he'd brought the knife, but only as a prop, and Marcus had grabbed it. In his third version, Tyler claimed they'd found the knife at the park and were examining it when the accident occurred. 3 different versions. 3 fundamentally incompatible versions, yes. Did you find that significant? Extremely. People misremember details under stress. They don't fabricate entirely different chains of causation unless they're constructing a narrative rather than recalling events. Tyler was watching Vega with an expression of mild interest, as if this was a particularly engaging television show. Holloway was scribbling notes furiously. Chen introduced the body cam footage from the interrogation. The courtroom watched on a mounted screen as Tyler, in a grey interrogation room with concrete walls and a metal table, shifted his story. The audio was clean. The contradictions were glaring. And through it all, Tyler maintained that same easy smile, like he was working out a puzzle rather than explaining a death. When the footage ended, Judge Hendricks looked at Tyler for a long moment. He met her gaze again, unflinching. She made a note on her pad. "We'll adjourn for today," she said. "Reconvene Monday morning." In the holding area, while waiting to be transported back to the juvenile detention center, Tyler sat on a concrete bench and hummed to himself. A guard watched him from across the room. "You think this is funny?" the guard asked. He was older, maybe 50, with a face that had seen too many young defendants come through these halls. Tyler looked up. "I think it's interesting. A kid is dead. Yeah, that's the interesting part. How something that wasn't supposed to happen, happened. Like chaos theory. You know, the butterfly effect. That's not what this is, isn't it?" Tyler leaned back against the wall. Everyone wants simple stories. Good guy, bad guy. But what if it's just chaos? What if nobody's really in control? The guard stared at him. "You're in control of yourself, your choices. That's what this is about." Tyler smiled. "If you say so." Meanwhile, 3 miles away, in a small office at the police station, Detective Vega was pulling threads. She had Tyler's phone records, his social media accounts, his computer, hard drive imaged and being analyzed by the digital forensics team. She had witness statements from dozens of students. She had the crime scene photos spread across her desk, each image a brutal reminder of why this mattered. Her partner, Detective Luis Reyes, knocked and entered with 2 coffees. "You're going to burn out." "I'm going to find it," Vega said, not looking up. "Find what?" "Whatever he's hiding, because he is hiding something. His story doesn't just have holes, Luis. It's structurally wrong. People don't act the way he's acting unless they know something we don't." Reyes set a coffee on her desk. "Chen thinks the involuntary charge might be all we can make stick. Chen hasn't seen what I'm seeing. What are you seeing?" Vega finally looked up. Her eyes were bloodshot from screen time, but they were sharp. "Premeditation. I'm seeing a kid who planned this and thinks he's too smart to get caught." Over the weekend, the case consumed Brookvale. The local news ran features on Marcus Webb, a quiet kid who loved robotics, who'd been accepted to Ohio State's engineering program, who'd never hurt anyone. They interviewed his family, his teachers, his friends. The picture that emerged was of a gentle, awkward teenager who'd been bullied occasionally but had mostly kept to himself. Tyler's social media, by contrast, painted a different picture. His accounts showed a history of elaborate pranks, some genuinely funny, others cruel. There was a video of him convincing a classmate they'd been expelled, filming their breakdown, then revealing the joke. Another showed him staging a fake fight that had terrified bystanders. The comments were mixed. Some people thought he was hilarious. Others called him a sociopath. On Monday, the prosecution began building its case in earnest. Angela Chen called witness after witness, each adding a piece to the puzzle. A teacher testified that Tyler had been disciplined for a prank involving a fake bomb threat the previous year. A classmate described Tyler's obsession with going viral, with being famous. Another student, visibly nervous, testified that Tyler had once said he'd do anything for views. Through it all, Tyler sat at the defense table, sometimes attentive, sometimes bored, occasionally whispering comments to Holloway that made the attorney visibly tense. Once, during a particularly emotional testimony from one of Marcus's friends, Tyler yawned. The gesture was small, almost hidden behind his hand. But several people in the gallery saw it. The murmur that followed made Judge Hendricks bang her gavel. The real shift came on Tuesday afternoon, when the prosecution introduced motive. Angela Chen stood and addressed the court with the gravity of someone about to change the case's trajectory. Your Honor, the state would like to introduce evidence establishing motive for this crime. Holloway stood immediately. Objection. The charge is involuntary manslaughter. Motive is irrelevant to an accidental death. The state contends this was not accidental, Your Honor. Motive is entirely relevant. Judge Hendricks considered. I'll allow it. Proceed. Chen called Emily Vasquez, a senior at Brookvale High. Emily was small, with dark hair pulled into a ponytail and a nervous energy that vibrated off her as she took the stand. Chen approached gently. Emily, did you know both Tyler Raines and Marcus Webb? Yes, we all had AP chemistry together. Can you describe the relationship between Tyler and Marcus? Emily glanced at Tyler, then quickly away. They weren't friends. Tyler didn't really notice Marcus most of the time. Marcus was quiet. Tyler's like the opposite. Did something happen to change that dynamic? Emily nodded. Yeah, like 3 weeks before Marcus died, there was this thing. Tyler had been cheating on tests, not just like looking at someone's paper. He had a whole system with photos of answer keys and shared files. Marcus found out about it. How did Marcus find out? Marcus was a computer guy. He noticed some weird file sharing on the school network and traced it back to Tyler. He didn't want to be a snitch, so he confronted Tyler directly, told him to stop. And did Tyler stop? No. He told Marcus to mind his business, but Marcus felt like it wasn't fair, you know? People were getting grades they didn't earn, so Marcus reported it to the administration. What happened then? Tyler got suspended for a week. His college applications got flagged. He lost his spot on the academic honor roll. And everyone knew it was because of Marcus. Chen pulled up a series of text messages on the courtroom screen. These are texts from Tyler to a group chat with his friends, dated October 1st. Can you read the highlighted portion? Emily's voice shook slightly. It says, Webb thinks he's so smart, thinks he can ruin my life and walk away. We'll see who's smarter. The courtroom was silent. Chen let it sit for a moment, then continued. Did Tyler ever discuss Marcus again in your presence? Once, he said Marcus had made a mistake, that people who mess with him learn hard lessons. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I didn't think he meant, like, actually hurting him. I thought he just meant humiliating him or something. If I'd known. Thank you, Emily. Holloway's cross-examination tried to soften the blow, suggesting the texts were typical teenage bravado, that hard lessons could mean social consequences, not violence. But the damage was done. Tyler had a motive. The prank story suddenly looked like cover. Tyler, for the first time, looked genuinely annoyed. His jaw was tight, his fingers drumming on the table. When the court adjourned for the day, he turned to Holloway and hissed something. Holloway's response was low but firm, and Tyler sat back with a look of barely controlled frustration. The following morning, the prosecution introduced forensic evidence. Dr. Raymond Okoye, the county medical examiner, took the stand. He was in his 50s, with gentle eyes and a precise manner of speaking that came from years of testifying in court. Chen walked him through the autopsy findings. Dr. Okoye, can you describe the wound that caused Marcus Webb's death? The victim sustained a single stab wound to the lower left abdomen, penetrating approximately 4 inches deep. The blade severed the femoral artery, causing rapid blood loss. Death would have occurred within minutes without immediate medical intervention. In your professional opinion, was this wound consistent with an accidental injury during a struggle? Dr. Okoye paused, choosing his words carefully. The wound trajectory was upward and angled, consistent with a deliberate thrust. In a struggle where both parties are grappling for a weapon, we typically see multiple defensive wounds, slashing injuries to the hands and forearms as the victim attempts to protect themselves. Marcus Webb had no such injuries. What does that suggest to you? It suggests Marcus was not expecting the attack. The angle and depth of penetration suggest force and intent, not the chaotic motion of 2 people fighting over a weapon. Chen introduced crime scene photos. They were difficult to look at, and several people in the gallery turned away. Tyler looked at them with clinical interest, his head tilted slightly. Dr. Okoye, based on blood spatter analysis and the position of the body, what can you conclude about the immediate aftermath of the stabbing? The victim collapsed where he was struck. There's no evidence he moved significantly after the injury. The blood pooling patterns suggest he was conscious for perhaps 30 to 90 seconds before losing consciousness. He would have been aware of what was happening to him. The courtroom was utterly silent. Diane Webb was crying quietly, her husband's arm around her shoulders, and the weapon was found approximately 30 feet from the body. Is that correct? Yes. If this were an accident, if Tyler Raines had immediately sought help, as he claims, would you expect the weapon to be discarded that distance away? No. In a panic situation where someone is trying to help an injured person, the weapon would typically be dropped immediately at the scene. Moving it suggests a conscious decision to distance it from the body. Holloway's cross-examination challenged the certainty of these conclusions, suggesting alternative explanations for each piece of evidence. But the cumulative weight was building. This wasn't looking like an accident. It was looking like murder. Tyler's performance was beginning to crack at the edges. The smiles came less frequently. The glances at the cameras were more furtive. But he still maintained his composure, still believed he could control the outcome. On Thursday, a former friend of Tyler's took the stand. His name was Jason Kirby, and he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Jason had been close with Tyler freshman and sophomore year before drifting apart. Chen approached him with careful neutrality. Jason, when did you last speak with Tyler Raines? About 2 weeks before Marcus died. We ran into each other at the convenience store on 5th. What did you discuss? Jason hesitated, his eyes flicking toward Tyler. He was talking about Marcus, about the cheating thing. He was really angry. What specifically did he say? He said Marcus had ruined everything, that Marcus thought he was better than everyone, smarter, but that Tyler was going to show him. He said he was going to get rid of the problem. Get rid of the problem. Did you interpret that as a threat? I didn't know what it was. Tyler said stuff like that sometimes, like dramatic stuff. But he had this look, you know, like he really meant it. Did you report this conversation to anyone? Jason's face flushed. No, I didn't think. I thought he was just venting. I didn't think he'd actually do anything. The guilt on Jason's face was obvious. Chen didn't push further. Thank you. When Holloway cross-examined, he focused on Tyler's tendency toward dramatic statements, suggesting this was typical teenage exaggeration. But Jason held firm. This felt different, he said. I can't explain it, but it felt different. Tyler glared at Jason with open hostility. The mask was slipping further. When Jason stepped down, Tyler leaned to Holloway and whispered something that made the attorney close his eyes briefly, as if gathering patience. During a recess, in a private conference room, Holloway confronted his client. You need to stop, Holloway said, his voice low and hard. The way you're acting in that courtroom is destroying any sympathy we might generate. I'm not doing anything, Tyler said, leaning back in his chair with that same infuriating casualness. You smiled at the autopsy photos. You glared at Jason like you wanted to kill him too. The jury sees that. There's no jury yet. This is just preliminary. There will be a jury if this goes to trial, and based on the evidence they're stacking up, it's going to trial for murder, not manslaughter. Do you understand that? They're building a case that you planned this. They can build whatever they want. They can't prove intent because it was an accident. Holloway slammed his hand on the table. Then why did 3 witnesses testify you threatened Marcus? Why does the forensic evidence show a deliberate attack? Why were you the only one at that park with motive and opportunity? Tyler's expression shifted. Just for a moment. Something cold flickered behind his eyes. Because I'm smarter than they are. I've been smarter than everyone in that room since this started. And you know what? They're all performing too. The crying mother, the noble prosecutor, the disappointed judge. It's all theater. At least I'm honest about it. Holloway stared at his client. You think this is a game. Everything's a game, and I don't lose. But even as Tyler said it, even as he maintained that arrogant confidence, things were shifting outside the courtroom that he couldn't control. Detective Vega had been working 18-hour days, following every lead, every thread. She'd obtained search warrants for Tyler's home, his school locker, his car. The search of his bedroom had yielded notebooks full of prank ideas, some innocent, some disturbing. One page, dated 3 weeks before Marcus's death, had Marcus's name circled with notes around it. Park, late, nobody around. But the real break came from an unexpected source. Tyler had a younger sister, Melissa, age 14. Melissa had been interviewed briefly early in the investigation and had said she didn't know anything. But Melissa had been watching the news coverage. She'd seen her brother on television, smirking, playing to cameras while Marcus Webb's family grieved. And something in her had broken. She'd come to the police station with her mother, both of them looking exhausted and scared. In Detective Vega's office, Melissa had said, I need to show you something. The something was her phone. Specifically, a video file that had been automatically synced to her cloud storage. Tyler had borrowed her phone on October 14th, claiming his was dead and he needed to film something for a project. She'd forgotten about it until she'd started going through her files, looking for anything that might help her understand what her brother had done. When Vega first watched the video, her hands had gone cold. The video showed Tyler in his bedroom, phone propped on his desk, filming himself. The timestamp read October 14th, 7 hours before Marcus Webb died. Tyler was talking to the camera like he was rehearsing a script. "Okay, so here's how it's going to work," Tyler said in the video, pacing back and forth. "I tell Marcus I want to apologize, that I want to make things right. I ask him to meet me at the park to talk privately. He'll come because Marcus is the type who thinks everyone can be reasoned with." Tyler laughed. "Then I do the prank robbery thing. Make it look like it went wrong. They'll think it's an accident. They always do." In the video, Tyler paused, picked up a knife from his desk, the same knife that would later be recovered from the crime scene, and held it up to the camera. This should work. Not too big, not too small. Quick and simple. He set the knife down and leaned toward the camera, his face filling the frame. The best part is, even if anyone suspects anything, what can they prove? It's my word about what happened, and I'm good at words. I'm good at making people believe me. He smiled. They'll buy the accident story. I always win. The video ended. Detective Vega had sat in silence for a full minute after watching it. Then she'd called Angela Chen. The prosecution spent the next 3 days having the video authenticated. Digital forensic experts examined the metadata, confirming the date, time, and device. They verified the file hadn't been edited or manipulated. They confirmed the location data embedded in the file matched Tyler's home address. They analyzed Tyler's voice patterns and facial features, though such analysis was almost unnecessary, given how clearly visible and audible he was. Angela Chen knew this was the end of Tyler's defense. This was the smoking gun. His own words, his own face, his own admission of premeditation and awareness of guilt. She scheduled its presentation for the following Monday, giving the defense the required discovery notice, but knowing there was no possible counter to this evidence. Over the weekend, Marcus Holloway met with Tyler and showed him the video. Tyler watched it without expression. When it ended, he was silent for a long moment. "They can't use that," he finally said. "They absolutely can use that. It's authenticated, properly obtained, directly relevant." "I was joking. It's obviously a joke." "Tyler, you're holding the murder weapon. You describe the crime before it happens. You state your intent to deceive investigators. There's no interpretation where this is a joke." Tyler's composure finally shattered. "This is bullshit. You're supposed to be defending me. Figure out how to exclude it." "There's no legal basis to exclude it. Your sister voluntarily provided it. The search of her phone data was consensual. The chain of custody is perfect." Holloway leaned forward. "Tyler, you need to understand what's about to happen. When that jury sees this video, it's over. The only question is sentencing. Then make a deal. The prosecution isn't offering deals. Not anymore. They want murder one. I'm 17, which is why you'll be tried as a juvenile initially, but with a blended sentence that can extend into your adult years. You're looking at decades, Tyler. Possibly life." For the first time since his arrest, Tyler looked genuinely afraid. "This wasn't supposed to happen like this?" "No," Holloway said quietly. "You were supposed to get away with it, but you didn't." Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. The courtroom was more crowded than ever. Word having spread that something significant was coming. Tyler entered and, for the first time, didn't play to the cameras. He walked with his head down, his orange jumpsuit looking less like a costume and more like what it was, the uniform of the accused. Angela Chen stood as the judge called the court to order. Your Honor, the state would like to present critical evidence that goes to the heart of this case. Proceed. Chen nodded to her assistant, who wheeled in a large monitor. The state calls Dr. Patricia Hammond, Chief Digital Forensic Analyst for the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Dr. Hammond was in her 40s, with short red hair and the confident bearing of someone who testified frequently. She took the stand and was sworn in. Dr. Hammond, Chen began, what is your area of expertise? I specialize in the recovery, authentication, and analysis of digital evidence. I examine computers, phones, storage devices, and cloud data to recover files and verify their integrity and authenticity. Were you asked to examine a video file recovered in this case? Yes. On October 21st, I received a video file that had been obtained from a cloud storage account associated with Melissa Rains, the defendant's sister. I was asked to authenticate the file and determine if it had been altered or manipulated. What was your process? Dr. Hammond settled into technical explanation mode. I began by examining the file's metadata, which includes creation date, modification date, device information, and location data. The metadata indicated the file was created on October 14th of this year at 2:47 p.m. The device was an iPhone Model 12 registered to Melissa Rains. The location data embedded in the file corresponded to the Rains family residence on Oakmont Street. Can metadata be falsified? It can, but doing so leaves traces. I examined the file at the hexadecimal level, looking for signs of tampering, timestamp manipulation, or inserted data. I found none. The file is consistent with organic creation at the stated time and place. What about the video content itself? Can you determine if it's been edited? Yes. I analyzed the video frame by frame and examined the compression artifacts and data stream. An edited video shows discontinuities in these elements. This video showed no such discontinuities. It's a continuous, unedited recording. Can you verify the identity of the person in the video? I can confirm the video clearly shows facial features and includes audio. I compared the voice patterns to known recordings of the defendant's voice obtained from police interviews. The phonetic patterns, pitch, and cadence match. While I'm not a facial recognition expert, the physical appearance is consistent with the defendant. Chen paused, letting the foundation settle. Your Honor, at this time the state would like to enter into Evidence Exhibit 47, the authenticated video file, and present it to the court. Holloway stood. Your Honor, the defense objects. The video's prejudicial impact far outweighs any probative value. Your Honor, Chen countered. This video directly addresses the defendant's state of mind and intent. It's the most probative evidence in this entire case. Judge Hendricks looked at both attorneys, then at Tyler. Objection overruled. The court will view the evidence. The lights dimmed slightly. The monitor glowed to life. And then Tyler's face filled the screen, younger by mere weeks, but somehow different, more animated, more confident. The courtroom heard his voice. Okay, so here's how it's going to work. As the video played, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Every eye was fixed on the screen as Tyler described his plan, held up the knife, and delivered his final, damning line. "They'll buy the accident story. I always win." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence continued for several seconds. Then someone in the gallery gasped. A sound, half sob, half disbelief, that broke the spell. Other sounds followed. Murmuring, whispered shock, Diane Webb's crying. No longer quiet. Angela Chen didn't need to say anything. She simply stood there, letting the evidence speak. At the defense table, Tyler had gone completely white. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles bone pale. His leg was shaking uncontrollably under the table, a rapid tremor he couldn't stop. His breathing had gone shallow and fast. Marcus Holloway sat with his head slightly bowed, his pen motionless on his legal pad. There was nothing to write, no counter-argument to mount. His client had confessed on camera, and now the entire courtroom had witnessed it. Judge Hendricks looked at Tyler for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable, but something had shifted in her eyes. The clinical distance judges maintained had given way to something harder. "We'll adjourn for today," she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "The court needs time to consider what we've just seen. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning for closing arguments and sentencing recommendations." The bailiffs approached Tyler to escort him out. He stood on shaking legs, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. As he walked past the gallery, he didn't look up, didn't acknowledge the cameras. The performance was over. In the holding cell, Tyler sat with his head in his hands. A bailiff watched him from outside the bars. "I didn't mean it like that," Tyler said to nobody in particular, his voice hollow. "It was just talk, just practicing. I didn't mean it like that." The bailiff didn't respond. There was nothing to say. That evening, Angela Chen sat in her office, reviewing her closing statement. She'd written and rewritten it a dozen times. But after seeing that video in court, watching the defendant's facade crumble, she realized most of her prepared remarks were unnecessary. The video had done the work. Tyler had condemned himself more thoroughly than any prosecutor ever could. Still, there were things that needed to be said. For Marcus, for his family, for the record. She worked late into the night, refining her words, making sure they carried the weight this moment demanded. The next morning, the courtroom reconvened. Tyler looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face drawn. He sat slumped at the defense table, a stark contrast to the cocky teenager who'd entered these proceedings 2 weeks ago. Judge Hendricks took her seat and surveyed the courtroom. "We're here for closing arguments and sentencing recommendations. Ms. Chen, you may proceed." Angela Chen stood and walked to the center of the courtroom. She didn't use notes. "Your Honor, this case began with a defendant who believed he could control the narrative, who believed that if he performed well enough, smiled at the right moments, told his story with enough confidence, the truth wouldn't matter." Tyler Raines walked into this courtroom thinking he was the smartest person here, thinking that his ability to manipulate, to deceive, to charm would be enough to escape accountability for what he did. She turned slightly toward Tyler. "But the truth has a way of emerging, not through theories or speculation, but through evidence, through the painstaking work of investigators who followed every lead, through witnesses who came forward despite their fear, and ultimately, through the defendant's own words." Chen activated the monitor again, freezing on the image of Tyler holding the knife. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is not a prank gone wrong. This is a 17-year-old boy planning to murder another human being because that person dared to hold him accountable for cheating. Marcus Webb's crime was having a conscience, and for that, Tyler Raines decided he deserved to die. The courtroom was silent. The defense will argue that Tyler is young, that he made a mistake, that he deserves a second chance. But Marcus Webb will never get a second chance. Marcus will never go to college, never pursue his dreams of becoming an engineer, never fall in love, never have a family. Marcus's future ended in a pool of his own blood in a park at midnight, while Tyler Raines walked away and began constructing his lies. Chen's voice hardened. The state asks this court to recognize this crime for what it is: premeditated, calculated murder. We ask for a blended sentence that acknowledges the defendant's age, but also acknowledges the severity of his crime and the complete absence of remorse he demonstrated until the moment he realized he'd been caught. Justice for Marcus Webb demands nothing less. She returned to her seat. Holloway stood for his closing. He looked tired, a man going through motions he knew were futile. Your Honor, I won't insult this court's intelligence by pretending the video doesn't exist or doesn't matter. It does. But I ask the court to consider that Tyler Raines is 17 years old. His brain is not fully developed. The parts of the brain that control impulse, that understand consequences, that feel empathy are still forming. This doesn't excuse what happened, but it provides context. He glanced at Tyler, who was staring at the table. Tyler made a terrible, irreversible mistake. He took a life, and he'll carry that weight forever. But he's still a child in the eyes of the law, and the purpose of the juvenile system is rehabilitation, not pure punishment. I ask the court to impose a sentence that punishes, but also allows for the possibility that Tyler can one day understand the magnitude of what he's done and become something other than his worst act. Holloway sat down. It was a competent argument, but hollow. Everyone in the room knew it. Judge Hendricks looked at Tyler. Mr. Raines, stand up. Tyler stood on unsteady legs. His hands were shaking. Mr. Raines, this court has presided over juvenile proceedings for 2 decades. I have seen children who made mistakes. I have seen children overwhelmed by circumstances beyond their control. I have seen children who committed crimes out of desperation, fear, or ignorance. She paused. You are not one of those children. Tyler's eyes were wide, his breathing rapid. This court has witnessed your performance from the moment you entered these proceedings. Your smirks, your glances at the cameras, your complete absence of empathy for the family of the boy you killed. You treated this courtroom like a stage, treated justice like a game you believed you could win through manipulation and charm. Judge Hendricks' voice grew harder. But your own video, your own words, have revealed the truth. You planned Marcus Webb's murder. You obtained a weapon specifically for that purpose. You lured him to a location where you could kill him without witnesses. You carried out that plan with precision. And then you constructed an elaborate lie designed to portray yourself as a victim of circumstance. Tyler's face was crumpling, tears beginning to stream down his cheeks. The only reason you're standing before this court looking remorseful now is because you were caught, not because you feel genuine remorse for taking a life, not because you understand the enormity of what you've done, but because your performance failed, because for once in your life you didn't win. The judge leaned forward. Let me be absolutely clear. This was not a prank. This was not an accident. This was deliberate, premeditated murder carried out by someone who believed he was too clever to face consequences. You killed Marcus Webb because he dared to hold you accountable for your cheating, because he threatened your self-image as someone who always wins. And in doing so, you revealed yourself to be exactly what you are, a narcissist who values his own ego more than human life. Tyler was openly sobbing now, his shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, I didn't. You didn't mean to get caught, Judge Hendricks cut him off. Your video makes that abundantly clear. They'll buy the accident story. I always win. Those were your words, Mr. Rains, not words of remorse, not words of someone who made a mistake, words of someone who planned to deceive, who planned to manipulate, who planned to escape justice. She picked up a document from her desk. This court finds that the evidence presented, particularly the video evidence, proves beyond any reasonable doubt that you, Tyler Joseph Rains, committed premeditated murder. While you are being sentenced in juvenile court due to your age, the severity of this crime, and your demonstrated lack of genuine remorse require the maximum sentence available under law. Tyler's knees buckled slightly. The bailiff stepped closer. You are hereby sentenced to 40 years to life in a blended juvenile to adult facility. You will serve your initial sentence in juvenile detention until age 21, at which point you will be transferred to adult prison to serve the remainder of your sentence. You will not be eligible for parole until you have served a minimum of 40 years. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Diane Webb was crying, but this time the tears seemed different, relief mixed with grief. Judge Hendricks wasn't finished. I want you to understand something, Mr. Rains. You are going to spend the majority of your life behind bars. You will miss your 20s, your 30s, your 40s. You will age in a cell, separated from society, stripped of the freedom you took from Marcus Webb. And every day of those 40 years, I want you to remember why you're there. Not because of bad luck, not because the system was unfair, but because you chose to murder another human being, and because you believed you were too smart to pay for it. She looked at him with something approaching contempt. You were wrong. This court will not be manipulated. Justice will not be deceived. And you, Mr. Rains, will finally face the consequences of your actions. Judge Hendricks's gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. This court is adjourned. Tyler collapsed into his chair, his face buried in his hands, his entire body racked with sobs. The bailiffs approached to take him into custody. As they lifted him to his feet, he looked toward his mother in the gallery. She was crying, her face a mask of horror and grief. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came. They led him away. The orange jumpsuit that had seemed like a costume now looked like exactly what it was, the uniform of a convicted murderer. In the days that followed, the case became national news. The video, or portions of it, circulated widely despite legal restrictions. Tyler's face became synonymous with narcissistic arrogance meeting justice. Legal commentators debated whether the sentence was appropriate for a juvenile. Psychologists discussed the warning signs of narcissistic personality disorder in teenagers. School districts across the country implemented new programs to address bullying and accountability. But in Brookvale, the impact was more personal. Marcus Webb's family established a scholarship in his name for students pursuing engineering. The robotics lab at Brookvale High was renamed in his honor. His friends gathered regularly at the park where he died, which the city eventually converted into a memorial garden. A week after sentencing, Angela Chen visited the garden. It was quiet, the late October air crisp. Someone had planted chrysanthemums around a small plaque bearing Marcus's name and dates. She stood there for a long time, thinking about justice, about loss, about a 17-year-old boy whose potential had been stolen. Detective Vega found her there. They stood together in silence for a while. "You did good work," Chen finally said. "We both did. Do you think he understands yet? Tyler, do you think he gets it?" Vega considered. "Maybe not yet, but he has 40 years to figure it out." Chen nodded. It wasn't satisfying, exactly. Nothing about this case was satisfying. A boy was dead. Another would spend his life in prison. Families were destroyed. But it was just. The truth had emerged. The performance had ended. And perhaps that was all they could hope for. In the juvenile detention center, Tyler sat in his cell. The walls were concrete block, painted an institutional beige. The bed was a thin mattress on a metal frame. There was a small desk, a toilet, a sink. Nothing else. He'd stopped crying hours ago. Now he just sat, staring at nothing, his mind replaying everything. The trial, the video, the judge's words, the look on his mother's face. 40 years. He'd be 57 when he became eligible for parole. 57. An old man, his entire life gone. For the first time since Marcus died, Tyler allowed himself to think about what had actually happened that night. Not the story he'd told himself, not the narrative he'd constructed, but the truth. Marcus's face when he'd realized the knife wasn't a prop. The sound he'd made, the way he'd looked at Tyler, confused and betrayed and terrified. Tyler had walked away and left him there to die. Had gone home and practiced his lies, had believed he could charm his way out of murder. The judge's words echoed in his mind. "You believed you were too smart to pay for it. You were wrong." She was right. He had believed that, had always believed he was smarter than everyone else, that rules didn't apply to him, that he could manipulate any situation to his advantage. And maybe, in some twisted way, that belief had been true until it wasn't. Until his own arrogance had led him to record his confession. Until his own sister had found the video and her conscience had outweighed her loyalty. Tyler lay down on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the building, someone was yelling. Doors clanged. Guards' radios crackled. This was his life now. This cell. These sounds. This reality. The performance was over. The audience had gone home, and Tyler Raines was finally, truly alone with what he'd done. Outside, the sun was setting over Brookvale. In the memorial garden, the chrysanthemums swayed in the autumn breeze. Marcus Webb's name was carved into stone, permanent and unchanging. A life ended, another irrevocably altered, and in the space between, the machinery of justice had turned, imperfect but necessary, grinding forward towards something that resembled accountability. The courtroom doors had closed, the gavel had fallen, the sentence had been pronounced, and in that small Ohio town, people tried to make sense of it all, to find meaning in tragedy, to believe that truth still mattered and that the performance of innocence could never fully replace its reality. The case of Tyler Raines would be studied, debated, referenced for years to come, but for those who knew Marcus Webb, for those who loved him, It would always be personal. A reminder that behind every case number and legal proceeding was a human being whose story ended too soon. And perhaps that was the real verdict. Not the 40 years, not the legal maneuvering, not the dramatic courtroom revelation, but the simple, terrible truth that actions have consequences, that lives have value, and that no amount of charm or manipulation can ultimately change what is real. Tyler had said he always won, but in the end, he'd lost everything that mattered: his freedom, his future, his carefully constructed image of himself as untouchable. The only winner, if such a word could even apply, was truth. Messy, painful, undeniable truth. And in the quiet of the memorial garden, as darkness fell and the first stars appeared overhead, that truth remained, carved in stone, permanent, unchanging. Marcus Webb had existed, had mattered, had been loved, and Tyler Raines would spend the rest of his life remembering the boy he'd killed and the lie that had finally, inevitably, fallen apart.